Everybody, Chad Madden here with the Grow Your Practice podcast, and very excited for you. In this episode, we are with Colin Sisco. Colin is the owner of Kaizen Physical Therapy in Kirkland, Washington, the Seattle, Washington area. He also, if you're familiar with the news at all from 15, 18 months ago, that was kind of the epicenter, ground zero for the beginning of the pandemic here in the US. So welcome to the call here, Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
Great. So can you give us a little bit of an update, or at least a backstory? I know you have a unique situation where you bought an existing practice. Can you talk about how you came into that position and ultimately what ended up happening there?
Yeah, so I graduated PT school in 2010 and immediately came back to work for the clinic where I was an aide, which is actually in the same location I'm in right now. So worked for them for a few years. They were looking, it was a husband and wife that owned the business, and they were looking to, at some point, try to find someone to groom to take things over. And they were not interested in selling to a larger corporation. So in their mind, their thought was either we find someone younger that's willing to, learn from us, work a lot of hours, and take this over for us, or just close our doors. That's kind of what their mindset was. So worked for them for a few years. They weren't quite ready. They liked the idea of selling, but they weren't quite ready. They wanted to have some better, a better track record on their financials before selling, which made sense. If you're going to sell, you want to be in the best position possible. And they didn't feel like they were quite there yet. They had a couple of years. I think there were some losses in there. So they wanted to turn things around and, have me buy it at the best valuation they could get. And so they weren't quite ready to do that. And so I was recommended by a colleague of mine to go and work for this other clinic that wasn't too far away with another owner that was looking to do the same thing. It sounded more promising. So I actually left the first clinic on good terms. They were like, yeah, we want you to go ahead and learn how to take over a business, and maybe you'll be in a position when we're actually ready to sell, you can come back and maybe we'll talk more then. So I went to this other place, and I was working pretty much like 70 hours a week for like 5 years straight, just saving money like crazy. And was trying to learn some things from that person, but it never quite worked out. They weren't quite ready, I guess, to share as much as they wanted to. And so that one didn't really quite pan out as well, but it worked out just because the first clinic I had left, they were ready to retire. And at about 5 years in, they said, hey, we're ready to talk with you if you're willing to, if your situation hasn't quite panned out yet. And so that's kind of how it came about.
I don't think I realized before, or maybe just misremembered, that you worked for a second clinic for 5 years.
Yeah. So 2010 to 2013 was the first one where I was originally an aide before school. And one of the PTs I was working with knew this other owner that was just a few miles north. And so, yeah, I was there for like 5 years, didn't quite pan out, but things ended well. It wasn't like a bad separation or anything. They just, in the end, realized they weren't quite as ready as they wanted to be. So ended up talking to the first one again. Things worked out, but that was definitely an interesting process. Not having any business background or what questions to ask. I knew from a CPA and an attorney I'd talked to some things to try to look at. At that time, I didn't even know how do you go about getting a valuation? Like, no clue, just absolutely no idea. So the sellers of the business I bought, their CPA suggested, and I don't know how this compares to other valuation methods, but they were suggesting a 40 to 60% of, I think, net revenue, like an average of the past 5 years. So not knowing any different, that's just what we went with. And I knew just enough that I wasn't going to entertain any offer close to 60%. There were some things in there. They had a higher Medicare population than I liked. There really weren't any obvious active marketing systems in place. There really wasn't any new patient or visit growth since I had left. The owner was still working close to full time, so I knew that didn't really give me a good picture of, well, how does this clinic look financially without the owner treating full time? I know the office manager was leaving to go to PT school in a year. There was a couple of PTs close to retirement, and a couple of the tax returns on a couple of years where there were a couple losses in there. So I knew, like, okay, this wasn't going to be a higher valuation, but they were wanting to sell. But that was kind of an interesting situation. People you worked for, people you knew, and kind of having to explain why you were kind of offering a lower end. Like that was kind of hard for me to do, having no experience with any kind of buying, selling, negotiations of any kind. So that was kind of an interesting experience.
Okay, let's break that apart a little bit. What year did you end up purchasing the practice?
This was like New Year's Eve of 2018. So I took over like January 1st, 2019.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so I've never heard of that type of valuation method, but that's okay.
Yeah.
In PT, what I understand it to be, and I'll give you an example. So let's say the revenue was $1 million in revenue. From the method you were talking about, 40 to 60% of net revenue, my guess is the value of that practice would be 400 to 600K.
Yeah.
Right. So the traditional method is really based on a multiple of the EBITDA. So, if the EBITDA is 200K with the fair market value compensation of the previous owners included in there, because you obviously have to replace them either by hiring yourself or another replacement. So like if the example was 200K, that might be a 2 to 3 multiple, which would put you at the same exact spot of 400 to 600K.
Yeah.
Could be higher, let's say 250, could be lower, 100,000, or you said there were some losses there.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that you commented on, which was very key, is the historics. So if the new patients and visits are pretty much flatlining, and there's not a diverse way to get new patients in the door, attract new patients, then that leans toward a lower valuation, lower multiple.
Yeah.
Where if you're very diversified and your new patient flow and your visits are growing, and you're growing more than the industry average, 6.2% year over year, then that's a higher valuation as well. So question for you, if you were to go back, or if there's a listener right now and they're an aspiring private practice owner, what advice would you give them, knowing what you know now from your experience, in terms of how to make sure that you end up in a spot where you can grow the practice, you can pay, I'm just assuming you didn't pay cash for the practice.
No, we did.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
So good for you.
Yeah.
So I believe that most people are going to have to, borrow some money to purchase the practice. What advice would you give so somebody doesn't find themselves, they buy the practice and January 1 they wake up and there's no way that I can make a go of this?
Oh boy. I would say definitely. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like running a business, like for the first time, I don't know if people have ever said this before, but it definitely, at least for me, exposed every weakness I didn't know I had.
Like what were some of those weaknesses?
Oh, just like a competitiveness that, like, from playing sports and like getting into college, like everything growing up was always like be better than the next person, and like everything's got to be perfect, and like perfect grades, and all this stuff. And it just, everything was like short-term wins and losses, and no really talk of like the long game, that like Simon Sinek speaks about. And so it's just like, I would say, yeah, if I had to go back, I would say make a plan, which includes talking to a lot of people in the industry that know a lot more than you. Like, you've got to do that first. Figure out, in talking to them, like, what are the most important metrics you need to be aware of. Secondly, check your perfectionism at the door. That just is not a good long-term trait for running a business. It's just not at all. And then I would say, thirdly, like, just get started. If you're new at it, you're going to make some mistakes along the way. And everybody's heard the phrase that Rome wasn't built in a day, and that's great. But I like to think about it in terms of Rome also didn't fall apart in a day either. So like, you can have one slip there, second slip there, and you can still recover. Like, you can still build it back up and make it how you want it to be. So yeah, so make a plan. Number one, talk to people in the industry that know more than you. Learn what metrics you should know about. Second, check your perfectionism at the door. 3, just get started. And 4, like, Rome didn't fall apart in a day. So like, keep those things in mind. I think you'll be fine if you do those 4 things. So
That's great off the top of your head. That was really good.
yeah.
Have you talked with anybody else that was buying a practice?
No, not really. So I kind of kick myself for not having done that. Like, that's just like how naive I was, like, having no business background. I really didn't know anybody that had done that. Like, who can I talk to? And like, if I had known people in the breakthrough group ahead of time, like, that would have been great.
Yeah. My guess is there's going to be some owners or aspirational owners reaching out to you now, which thank you in advance for your help, Colin.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause if like, most people I've met now through the breakthrough group, they had some kind of connection or mentor or someone they knew that gave them a little leg up, like something to stand on to start with. But yeah, I really didn't have anything. Like, I knew what things to consider in the buying process of the practice. Like, okay, this is why I should lower the valuation and not have it be higher, but had no clue on metrics whatsoever. And now, like, going through all the breakthrough stuff, like, I'm super thankful to have known that. And yeah, I wish I had known that, like, right out of school. Like, that would have been a really cool, almost like a fellowship in like business training, like, for a year. Like, that would have been a great idea. I would have totally taken someone up on that offer. Like, if they said, oh, like, do you want to do this 1-year fellowship and like running a private practice, I would have been like, sure. Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah, I don't know if you know, that was the original idea.
Oh, okay.
Founded a company called the PT Apprentice, which was that was going to be the model. And you had talked about, before we hopped on here, about the podcast with Ben and how he had that unique partnership model. I had learned something very similar from just reading about what Ben Franklin did with his printing business.
Oh, yeah.
How he would bring somebody, apprentice them, and then help them open up their own print shop.
Yeah.
So that was the origination of the idea. And then luckily met Carl and kind of went a very unique path to the similar ends. But
Yeah.
business fellowship, got it. Definitely noted there. So can you give us an idea when you took over the practice in January 1, 2019, what were at the time, what was your new patient and visit flow like then, either on a weekly or monthly basis?
Yeah, so I know weekly visits, they were around 120 a week, and new
Okay.
patients a month, that fluctuated anywhere between like 30 to 50.
Mhm.
And that had been, for the most part, pretty, oddly enough, pretty much the same since I started with them in 2010 as a PT for those 3 years. I honestly think even as an aide, when I was there in like '06, '07 as an aide, it was about the same. Like they had been like one of the first private practices in the Seattle area back in the late '70s,
Mhm.
and just did the traditional thing at the time, which was just tons of doctor lunches, and just hustled and did that for a good 10, 15 years, and were able to live off that reputation pretty much ever since, but things just never really grew beyond that.
Yeah.
So
Some people don't want to do
yeah,
that, right?
yeah.
So after you took over, what goals for Kaizen did you have, and then ultimately what did? And I know last year was kind of a wreck, but
Yeah.
what did that look like? What were your original goals? A little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and then what happened? What did you put in?
Yeah, so my first year was honestly just to introduce myself to all the physician referrals that I didn't know personally yet. So that was kind of the main focus. Um, since I knew that was kind of pretty much their only source of new patients, I figured, well, I better at least start there. So I kind of just focused on that. My goal, honestly, the first year was just if we could just maintain the numbers while I figured out what I was doing, like how to run a business. And so pretty much managed to do that, except for the fact that I didn't realize I had too high of a percentage of monthly revenue going to wages. So, at the end of the month and halfway into the first year, and definitely at the end of the second year, it's like, oh man, I had no idea exactly what I thought I would make as a new owner. But it definitely, wherever I was at was not close. And I was kind of sitting there thinking like what happened here? Like, I don't understand what's going on. And so, yeah, there were just like, I know we were far north of 55%
Mhm.
going to wages. And I was only seeing patients a couple days a week because I needed those other few days to kind of digest like what I was doing, like just trying to figure things out, and making sure I was meeting with the front desk and other people just to stay on top of things. So I don't know which kind of training sessions it was with Breakthrough, but just kind of figured out uh, different metrics, like, okay, wages shouldn't be probably higher than 55%. So I just started taking on more patients, treating more, and that helped kind of bring those wages down. And our profit margin was not good. I think at the end of the first year, we were definitely under 10%.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, just with, again, things I learned through Breakthrough, we're now at almost 20%.
Good for you, man. That's great.
So we're doing good. I didn't even know this is how silly it was. Like when I first took over, just different metrics I had no idea about. I didn't even consider a cost per visit. Didn't even ask the previous owners, like, hey, what's your cost per visit? Like they showed me their average revenue per visit, but I didn't even think like, well, what's the cost per visit? And so we just did not have a good profit margin. So it started to make more sense. And in an odd way, the pandemic, I don't want to say like saved the business, but it certainly forced me really quickly to figure out like what wasn't going right.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So last probably February or March, where you're at, there is a complete shutdown at one point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So can you talk about that? So you're 14 months into owning the practice. Can you talk about that experience, what you ended up doing, how you did survive that? And then I'll probably ask you for your biggest takeaways or learning lessons from that experience.
Yeah. So yeah, right before things kind of shut down in March, we had a couple of really good shoulder workshops. I remember the one right before things shut down. We had 20 people in the room, which was pretty close to what our gym space could max out at. And after I gave the close, 16 people signed up for evals, and I thought, oh, great, this is cool. Like, if we can keep this going, like, probably max out the space at the end of the year, think about another location. Yeah, and then things kind of quickly shut down. It's like every week some person on TV would say something, and like we'd have a staff meeting every week, and I'd say, okay, well, it looks like, we're probably going to lose this number of visits. Like, okay, like, here's how things are going to look, get the team on the same page. And someone else would say something again. And then the next week it was like, oh no, instead of losing 10%, we're going to lose like 30% this week. And we had this running joke in the clinic that like whoever guesses the last day that, or the day that we finally have no patients coming in, like, okay, you can get the last $5 in the bank account. But we got down to 20, I think our lowest point was 27 visits a week for a while. So that, and as a new owner, I had no idea what to think. I actually was pretty positive about it just because everybody on the team was willing to kind of just kind of support me and kind of be there for me. So but I really had no idea what to think. It was this weird nebulous time of like not having any clarity. Like, usually if you're going through a tough spot in life, you can kind of see like, okay, here's where the end point is. And but it was just kind of, I really didn't know what to think. I actually thought, well, this is a good life lesson in why you keep your personal assets separate from the business. Like, in case it, like, as a worst case scenario, if it did go belly up and it did go bankrupt because we couldn't see patients for a long enough time, I thought, okay, well, if that happens, like, so be it. But
did you do telehealth?
We did for a while. It ended up being about maybe 20% of kind of what we were seeing at one time. But
so those 27 visits were live.
Yeah, and luckily those 27 visits were people that had a week or two before things shut down a recent knee replacement or some kind of surgery where they had to be in here. Yeah. So that's kind of what kept us afloat for a while, but a lot of things went well. The PPP loan did help. Mm-hmm. Our landlord kind of surprised us. He actually reached out to me a couple of days before I was going to call him and just see if we could work something out for a time period. But we did a partial rent payment, and we've just been keeping track of the unpaid balance and just converting that to months on the back end of the current lease.
That's pretty generous.
Yeah, so help from the landlord, the first draw PPP, and our state has a partial unemployment program, because the one problem I was kind of struggling with was there weren't enough patients to like give everybody. So it's like, well, I don't want to let the PTs go on full unemployment, and there's still patients of theirs that need to be seen, and if they don't want to see me, then we're going to lose those visits. So we had them on a partial unemployment program. So whatever hours that they weren't seeing patients, the state picked that up and paid them at their base wages for a time period.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so that all those factors really helped out a lot. And I forget which episode it was. It may have been at like a quarterly thing with Breakthrough, but someone was asking a question about whether to back off on marketing spend, or like what kind of expenses should you be cutting there during this time? Which ones should you just keep going with? And someone had said something about just to keep the marketing going.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we went down to a trickle. I know on some of our daily calls that we were hosting at the time, that topic came up. I can't remember. It's all kind of a blur now, but if July of last year, we talked about continuing to market at the virtual summit. But I mean, for us and most other owners, it was don't shut it off completely. Just keep um, a small flow going, to that we're I am thinking it could have been Chris Redding
Maybe.
in an interview. I know Larry Benz was in there as well. Yeah, I know it came up on the daily calls and it came up in Summit as well. So is that what you ended up doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we just kept things going. We actually had a few good virtual workshops that went well. Like 9 people would attend and we'd convert 7. So like
Nice.
those still went pretty well. Yeah.
I know you you started to discover, I believe you were the first owner that I had heard of that was using the polls feature in Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about that, how you started iterating and learning with the online workshop?
Yeah. So we just, the poll questions were good. It was just a nice way to be more interactive with the people. So it kind of forced them to be engaged more often. And we definitely found just through testing that not doing poll questions, just fewer people dropped off from the workshops, more people signed up, became patients after. So yeah, I would just say that, yeah, anybody still doing virtual with the workshops, then yeah, definitely just integrate those poll questions. So yeah.
Are you back to live now?
No, but I was just discussing it with my marketing person. And we've been asking current patients, like if you were to come to a workshop, would you attend in person? And half the people have said yes, half have said no, I probably would do it virtual. So, but it sounds like our state's going to really open up at the end of this month.
Nice.
So I think we're going to do our first in person in August, because in July we're going to do a general public GPE and something else. So we'll do our first in person one again in August, and that'll be great to get back to doing. So
Great. Just for the listeners, GPE is it's essentially a promotion of free exams to the public that goes out. And the other thing that I'd encourage you to do, Colin, is Dora and Kara, 2 owners, shared this, what they started doing, and we tested it and worked really well. If you're still doing virtual workshops, we would do the live workshop. So we would capture people who registered and were willing to come in live. And typically it's a smaller group,
yeah.
maybe 6-10 people in a group. Then everybody who was not willing to come in, we would host another workshop after that live one.
Okay.
That we would invite everybody to. So if you're comfortable coming in live, great. But because we already have the ad spend there, we already have the registrant, now we would just host a separate workshop online. It's a little more time and effort, but it kind of meets people where they're at in terms of their comfort level.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a good idea.
Something to think about with your marketing person.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Yep. Yeah. So looks like things are opening up. And where and just out of curiosity, how many square feet do you have?
It's 2027.
Okay.
So we're looking to, my goal back in December, so not too long ago, I was thinking, if we're at 155 visits a week a year from now, so this December coming up, I thought that I'd be really happy with that. But we've just hit 156 even like a month ago, roughly.
Nice.
And we're still kind of maintaining that. Obviously the holiday, it takes out a day there, but so we're kind of already there, and I don't see things slowing down really. So I don't see why we can't max out the space here around like 200 by the end of the year. Right? So
That's great.
yeah.
It's always nice when you meet 12-month goals in 5 months.
Yeah, for sure. So
That's a good game.
yeah.
And since you took over the practice January of 2019, what does your staff look like? How have you grown? Sounds like you hired a marketer during that time. What's your current staff look like, and who did you bring on board?
Yeah, so right now we've got two other PTs besides myself, so they're pretty much full time doing like 410s, with pretty much a full schedule. And we have a part-time PTA that just helps with overflow, like if patients need to come in twice a week or even 3 times a week, and we can't quite see them for all those visits, she helps kind of take over that, and she's just in a couple days a week helping out there doing that. We have one full-time aide, and my marketing person, she does works up at the front desk like 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week we have a backup person that lets her focus on the marketing tasks and just does the front desk those 3 days. But that person, the part-time front desk person, is actually going home for the summer, so that's the big reason why we're hiring the office manager. It was just kind of time, like as now that we've gotten up to a certain number of visits and it's become difficult to treat full time but still work on the business. Yeah, it's kind of good timing that she had to go home for the summer, and we needed to hire a replacement anyway, but we just decided this person needs to become like the office manager and take things off my plate, so my current marketing person, who's like double and triple dipping on duties, can just focus on the marketing.
Excellent. That'll
Yeah.
support your growth really well.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you about is you talked about the previous owners pretty much had it ingrained in terms of the physician marketing, but it doesn't sound like they were doing too much direct to consumer. When you started looking at, so for anybody buying a practice, the arbitrage or the potential always is, and if you paid, we'll say something hypothetical, $250,000 for the business, and you can, over time, 10, 20 years or so, if it grows to worth $10 million, that's arbitrage, right? You have
Right.
room for growth. So you wanted to do something new in the business. Eventually, once you went out, introduced yourself to all the physicians, and at least didn't abandon what had made the previous owner successful.
Right.
How did you decide and think through, what was your mental state as you were exploring, how do I grow this business with direct to consumer marketing?
I know. So the second clinic I was working at, some like the initial breakthrough ads just like came into my email, and so I'd watch, a little short video that you had done or something. But at the time, the person I was working for, they weren't really receptive to like joining the killer marketing or other things like that. It was sort of like, well, I got this, and
This is the practice you were at for 5 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I entertained the idea of like talking to that person about like, hey, I think this could be a good thing. Like, we're not doing some of these things. Seems like it's worked for him and others. So maybe we should try it out. So yeah, so that really didn't kind of pan out suggesting that idea, but I had, kept getting ads from Breakthrough and yourself, and kind of thought, okay, let's explore this and see. So that was kind of my idea, was just learn everything in the killer marketing. And then in some of the promotional videos, like some of the owners that originally started out, they were talking about this at the time, Product X. I was like, what is this? Everybody keeps saying this. And so inquired about it, and got in with that. And so my thought was just learn as much direct to consumer marketing with the killer marketing and now the Growth X. And I had already sort of been doing direct to consumer, even just as a staff PT. Like I would tell my existing patients about direct access, and wouldn't really use that term. I would just say like, oh, like the next time something comes up, like just come in and see me the next day. Like you don't have to go and get a referral from your physician. And I remember at a monthly staff meeting at the first location, they were just going over stats about percentage, like where did patients come from. And, for the longest time, it was like 1% was like direct access or people coming in. And then a year later, after I just started telling my patients, like, hey, you can just come in, uh, whenever you need to, and won't be a problem. I think we went to like at least like 50% of the practice became people just referring themselves. It was a lot of return patients, but
Perfect.
but I thought like, oh, this exists, like, and it didn't really take off. Like the rest of the PTs didn't see it. Like, I don't know. Thought, oh, this is so easy. Like, just tell people they can come in and get seen. And so even in school, like PT school, I thought, oh, this is a really great idea. Like, you don't have to just go to physicians. Like, wow, you can actually market to the general public. Like, this is a really cool idea. So I've always promoted that, like wherever I worked, to my existing patients. And that's mostly what kept my schedule full as a staff PT.
Smart. Yeah, I noticed that with owners we're working with, or even analyzing our clinicians, those that have the best relationships with their past patient list, they always remain busy. It's
Yeah. So
good for you.
yeah. So everything. Yeah. Direct to consumer. Yeah. So what are we doing? Well, as I've like learned from you guys, like the number one asset is your past patients, and so I guess that's the other thing I did in the first and definitely during the second year was just starting with mastering like marketing to our past patient list. I don't know how this is for other PTs, but I know for myself, before I was an owner, I don't know why, there was just this feeling of like once you discharge a patient, I don't know, it's kind of weird to like market to them again, or it's like, okay, once you're done with them, it's almost like, I don't know, you just wanted to only see like newer people. And that always seemed like weird to like see a return patient come back for whatever, I don't know,
It's
for
like you
whatever reason. But
clinically you failed them if they
yeah,
haven't come back to you for the same thing.
I guess. And, I used to, it doesn't happen at the clinic here anymore because I've kind of worked with the PTs, but just at discharge, when patients are done and just PT saying like, oh yeah, hopefully we never have to see you again, blah, blah, blah. Like that doesn't happen anymore. It's more of like, hey, the next time something's bothering you, like, where to come, just give us a call. But yeah, so we used to kind of do that. And so now we've completely gotten out of that, and advertising to the past patient list and current patients, like that's the thing we do really well. And just like super focused on doing that. But yeah, we're doing the newsletter, which I think is our best, probably one of our best marketing tools. It
Great.
goes out to patients, like they call in and people are saying, yeah, I've saved all the recipes, and they'll ask particular items on the cover story, like how's your son doing, blah, blah, blah. Like, what family trips did you plan for the summer? I know you mentioned that in the most recent one, and people come back because whatever is in the FSI, in the insert that we're promoting, that does really well. So what else are we doing? Workshops to the general public, promote the workshop quarterly to past patients. There's the Facebook posts, all sorts of things. So yeah.
You share. So we'll have to talk through this verbally for people that aren't watching if they're listening on the podcast, but I'm going to share your patient life cycle
Sure.
flywheel, because
Yeah.
you have some good things in here.
Yeah, it's just sort of like in my head, like what I constructed, and then this is what I have taught my marketing person to follow up on. So at the top, it's just kind of in my mind, I was thinking, okay, if you just make one patient experience go really well, like if you just focus on that and then repeat that with every other new patient that comes in, I thought like, well, what would that look like? So just at the top, that's like the initial evaluation or kind of first encounter. So there's a lot of stuff up there, and I made my own little legend at the top. But there's just like a new patient paperwork series that goes out. There's a series of different things that go in there. Most patients usually with our clientele will fill stuff out ahead of time and send it to us, but they get that through email. There is the Back to Normal book that they get as well at the evaluation, if not for themselves. We just ask like, hey, do you know anybody, friend or family or coworker that's got back pain? Yeah, okay, here, take a copy. PTs all know about the 7-step killer exam there, so that's 7 SKE. So they all do that really well. My marketing person has an internal marketing interview, just asks basic questions, how the visit went, what things went well, what things maybe we fell short on, or expectations that weren't lived up to. Our aides score the outcome measures so that the PTs don't have to waste time doing that. That contact gets added to our ever-growing list of patients, so more people hear what we're doing, and yeah, that list just kind of keeps growing. And then usually around the 3rd visit, as long as it's appropriate, we test out the light force laser with people. We're always constantly thinking about what's that one unique item we're going to write in the discharge green ink letter to patients. So every staff meeting, we kind of go around and ask like everybody's current patients, like, what's your green ink letter item for people? What else happens? 6th visit, our marketing person has another check-in, and they'll ask about a cause opportunity.
Going to catch up on some quick definitions here. Cause is a part of your workshop, so that would be like a gym.
Yeah.
For the listeners here, like a gym would invite Colin in to present to their gym members on a topic.
Yeah. So, and we try to get a Google review. Sometimes we've gotten them at the initial eval, but if not done, then maybe at any point during the plan of care. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to wait until discharge, but we try to get that in there somewhere. The new patient paperwork series does ask for a Google review somewhere in there around the 6th visit, so that happens as well. And then at discharge, there's just a lot of things that happen. Patients go on our wall of fame, and then that photo and testimonial, besides going on the wall, it goes out in a little binder out in our waiting room. We fax those to the referring doctor so they know about it. The referring doctor also gets a kind of a little, we do them electronically now, but they get their own little green ink letter. We write a discharge letter to the patients. If they haven't already gotten a book, we give them one again for family or friends or coworkers. And then my marketing person has one final just kind of discharge interview to see how things went. And then even a month later, like we'll still write another letter to the patients just to check in, make sure things are going well. And we've actually recaptured a lot of past patients that just had something else that came up, like a different body part, different ache or pain. So yeah, the green ink letters are even just a month out after discharge have brought some people back in where they otherwise would have maybe gone 4, 5, 6 more months, just like having shoulder pain when we had previously seen them for knee pain. And yeah, it's amazing how many patients will get discharged and something new comes up a month later, and they'll go 6 more months without even thinking like, oh yeah, I was into Kaizen for my knee, like maybe they can treat my shoulder. And so yeah, the follow-ups with the letters go really well to kind of reactivate people. And then in the middle there, like these are just ongoing things. So NLP, that's just the Newsletter Pro. They do our newsletters for us. We market something, we promote something with the insert every month. The physicians also get a newsletter too. We're posting things to our Facebook page. GPE, the free exam day for past patients. We actually have one coming up in a couple weeks, which should go really well. Yeah, that happens a couple times a year, right before the slow times. Yeah, we've got the Goodwill email campaigns that go out, virtual workshops, but getting back to in person. We talked to a lot of businesses during the pandemic about cause opportunities. I think a lot of people were a little too stressed out about committing to some ideas. So now I'm talking to some of them again, and they're more receptive now that things are opening up more to do those. So I think the cause opportunities we're talking to businesses with will certainly help max out our space throughout this year. And then the Back to Normal book, we have given that out to some businesses. A lot of patients just take a bunch of copies because they want to give those to people they know. So we kind of get patients from that avenue. We actually just had we have really good word of mouth referrals from our current patients right now. I think a lot of it has to do with the soft skills of our therapists and support staff as well. But on the Nextdoor app recently, we had just some random person asking the community here, like, I have a shoulder issue, like, where's the best PT to go to? And I think 5 of our patients just happened to see the post, and so they just chimed in and said, yeah, I should go to see Kaizen. And so we actually got a patient out of that, and her daughter needed help, so we got 2 out of that, like, just from 5 of our patients chiming in, telling this person, like, hey, you need to go here. So I think that's the one proud thing, the thing I'm most proud of with the staff is just the good soft skills.
That's great.
Yeah.
One of the trends early on when we started Breakthrough and talking with other practice owners is most owners would say, we would ask what their marketing strategy is, and they would say, provide high quality of care and get word of mouth referrals. I would say what you're doing, you're really putting effort into getting that, and it's paying off well. So this is great. Well done. Congratulations on putting the flywheel together and getting those systems in.
Yeah, that's been a big thing during the pandemic was, I don't know if you created it or someone at Breakthrough, but there was something like 8 systems, 55 processes with your business, and
value stream.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, that was a really helpful tool, because I just sat down with the team and said, like, we're just gonna create this, and like it unique for our practice, but in a lot of detail. And so that's kind of what we spent a lot of time this past year working on when it was slow. And so definitely, paying off for sure.
Wonderful. Well, Colin, just want to go through some of my notes here because I have quite a few. You gave really smart advice, shared a bit of your story of how you came into, in a non-traditional way, into private practice ownership. You talked about the experience and your competitiveness, exposing your personal weakness. You gave a 4-step plan, which for anybody that's an aspiring owner and they're buying into a practice, that was excellent. You talked about the fellowship business owner, which I'll have to wrestle around.
I so wish like something was there when I came out of school. Like that would have been really great.
Working on it. You talked about your plans when you initially took over in terms of introducing yourself to the physicians that drove the business. And I think that was a really smart first step. Seems like it worked out well for you. Maintaining and figuring it out. You talked about, adjusting the wages over time too, and how that drove the profit margin up where you got your costs in check for your reimbursement level. You also talked about your pandemic experience and ultimately hitting your goal in April or May of this year that you were aiming for by the end of 2021. So this has been wonderful. Thank you very much for doing this. Is there any parting wisdom or advice you have for other owners that might be listening to this right now?
I would just say, don't ever ignore your past patient list. Like obviously to grow the business, you've got to, get new patients, go direct to the consumer. If you have good physician referrals still going, keep those relationships there. But just focus on the past patient list really well. Like they're always going to know, like, and trust you, as you've said. So, and that's kind of proof, like just with the Nextdoor app story, patients, we didn't have to tell them, we didn't even know what happened. There were just patients that came in and that we were treating currently that said, oh, I gave you a little shout out on the Nextdoor app. And it's like, okay, well, what happened with that? And so yeah, they'll definitely promote you if you focus on them and just show them that you really care. Like when we bring a patient back, like we never start by asking them like, well, how's your knee doing? There's always something else. We bring that up in staff meetings, like what's your other than the green ink letter item, what's your personal item you're going to ask the next series of patients when they come in? It's more like, oh, how's your mom doing? Like, I know she had this and this going on, like how's she doing? And so we always lead in with those things. And yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I don't know if you wanted to give a shout out here, but in the newsletter you sent over, I just have the front page.
Yeah.
And it's honoring the moms in my life. Anything that you want to share from it? Looks like it was you were honoring the mothers in your life for Mother's Day in your newsletter.
Yeah, definitely. My mom certainly, was a big part of just me getting to this point. And I don't know if I know Teresa, my wife, she's been really good kind of handling things at home during the pandemic and has definitely been the glue that's kind of kept the family together. I was kind of joking that, at some point I want to be able to back off on patient care so I don't have to come home and my kids point at me and say, hey, stranger danger, because that's sort of my humorous way of saying I'm not home as much as I should be. But yeah, she's been great through all of it. Anytime kind of like a manager for a sports team, he'd come home and complain to his wife about things that happened during the day. So she's listened to everything and has been awesome about it and been super positive and just allowed me to spend time on the business. And she knows why I'm doing it. And the kids know why I'm putting so much time into this to get it to a certain point. So yeah, definitely a shout out for Teresa, my wife. So yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Great. And you have 2 children?
3. So actually, Dylan, my stepson, I met him when he was 7. He's 18.
Okay.
He's a junior in high school, so just finishing that up. And then I've got Julian, he's 8, and then Allison, 2.5. So big spread.
Oh yeah.
There.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're 17 and 3, so almost.
We're pretty close. Yeah.
Almost the same spread. Yeah, I get it. We're graduating high school and getting out of diapers in the same day. It's
all at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. That's where we're at. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, congratulations to you and your team again on your growth as we're emerging here, Colin, and really appreciate you sharing and what you're doing as a private practice owner. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you for all you're doing, and I've learned a ton from stuff you've put out there, and so just super thankful for everything you've done and what you're going to continue to do for owners like myself. Because I probably would have just kept reinventing the wheel and doing tons of physician-only market. I don't know. I probably would have done other things and fumbled things up along the way, but all the stuff you put out there has allowed a newer owner like myself to start off on a much better footing and have a lot less painful experience. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Colin.
Yeah. Awesome.
Remember to visit getbreakthrough.com to access our free resource library designed specifically for private practice growth. While you're there, make sure you register for a complimentary growth assessment to learn about potential opportunities for growth in your local market. Again, Thank you for tuning into the Grow Your Practice podcast and supporting our mission to help people in pain get back to normal naturally.